Well, I want to go ahead and get us started. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ken Owens. I'm the team leader for our mission mobilization team, and looking forward to our call and our connection today with Salt Lake City, Send City Coordinator, and some of our church planters there, and hearing about what God's doing there, some of the needs and opportunities for partnership. And we'll have some opportunity to hear from them, but also to engage with some questions and hopefully some answers along the way. I want to welcome all of our South Carolina participants. We've got a good group of folks that are part of the call here from our churches, some who are already partnering there in Salt Lake City, some that are investigating and kind of trying to figure out if this is a place where God's calling them. And several of them were committed to be there at this time when we were looking at doing a vision trip there. But because of the pandemic and some of the challenges we've had to move this to more of a virtual vision tour. So appreciate you guys staying with it and wanting to be a part of this virtual vision tour as well. I also want to welcome our WMU Executive Director, Lori Register, on the call here today. Thank you, Lori, for being a part of it. They are highly instrumental in helping support missions around the world, and in particular with the Janie Chapman State Mission Offering. They take the lead in helping us promote that in our state. And this year we're looking to possibly highlight our partnership with Salt Lake in our Janie Chapman State Missions Offering emphasis. So appreciate Lori and her investment in the call today and working with us on that. I think many of you know Tim Rice, who is our partnership director for our mission mobilization team, also on the call with us. And then we also, I think he's been on, Robbie McAllister, who works with people groups within our state, is also a part of our team, and he's on the call today as well. I just want us to really have some opportunity to hear today again from the folks in Salt Lake City. And I'm going to begin with prayer, but after I pray, I'm going to turn it over to Bobby Wood. Bobby serves as the North American Mission Board Send City Coordinator for the Salt Lake City area and region there in Utah. Bobby is a South Carolina boy in background, so we claim him. He grew up in Summerville. He went to the University of South Carolina, and I'm going to forgive him for that. You know, as a Clemson man, I'm going to forgive him for going to the University of South Carolina. But it was at the University of South Carolina he got involved in our Baptist Collegiate Ministry program, and I was able to be a part of seeing him sent out as a summer missionary, as a college student back in the day. So that does date me a little bit, you know. But we sent him out to the Midwest part of the country, and basically he hasn't come back. God just kind of captured his heart for mission and ministry there, and we see him occasionally, but he's done a great job of planting his life in ministry there, and so grateful for Bobby and his leadership. And he's going to do some opening comments and then introduce the planters in Salt Lake, and we'll hear from them as he calls on them. Be thinking of your questions, South Carolina folks, because we will have some time for question and answer, and then we're going to pray over these brothers and the work that they're doing at this point as well. So let's begin with a word of prayer, and then I'll turn it over to Bobby. Let's pray together. God, thank you so much for the opportunity to be together. Even though we are separated by many, many miles, you have graciously provided through technology for us to be able to connect. And so we're grateful for that today. And I pray, God, for your blessings over this time and this call. And I pray, Lord, that you would just be working in and through it to draw us toward what you're doing all across the world, but specifically in Salt Lake City and the Utah area of our country. And Lord, help us to be sensitive to what you're saying to us, how you're calling us as your leaders to be about accomplishing your mission. And so, Lord, that's the spirit in which we begin this call. We just want to be open to your Holy Spirit to teach us and to guide us. And Lord, help us to follow your lead and your prompting to be about your kingdom's work. We love you, and we thank you most especially for the bond that we have in our Savior Jesus. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. All right, I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody, and then I'm going to ask Bobby to go ahead and start out by introducing himself and some of the work there, okay?
And I think I'm still.
No, you good.
Am I good? Okay. My name is Bobby Wood, and I've been out here in Utah for the last 10 years. I've been married for 12 years, and then we have 4 kids. Got that right. 4 kids, ages 8, almost 9, 6, 4, and 2. I came out here as a student pastor in 2010 after graduating from New Orleans Seminary, and was at that time that God put on our heart the desire to plant a church and call to plant a church. So we started a church in Salt Lake City 7 years ago called Redemption Church that still exists today. And then about 4 years ago, I came on with the North American Mission Board as a church planting catalyst, and now I'm on board as the Sin City missionary for Salt Lake City. And so basically what that looks like is trying to look at our city strategically, missionally, and how do we plant churches in our city. To give you some context on Salt Lake, it is the most unreached city in the United States of America. So when you look at just strict demographic percentages, we have about 98% of the population would disagree with the very basics of evangelical Christianity. If you read some stats, like Barna, for instance, Utah pops up as the most churched state in the country. And that is not because of Orthodox evangelical churches, but because of the LDS Church. And the LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it makes up the majority of those churches, a strong majority. They teach, that Jesus was a created being, our elder brother, that God even was once a man who became God, and as God is, man once was, and as man is God, or as God is, man may become, so that we may actually progress to godhood. And so the core foundational beliefs of the LDS Church is something called progression. It teaches that man may work his way up to the highest level of heaven by his works. So because of that philosophy and religion and theology, we have an industrious, hardworking, business-oriented, family-minded city. And because of that, it's a great place to live. I mean, it's beautiful. You have homes that are well-manicured lawns and beautiful, beautiful places. We have 7 national parks we're within 5 hours of. Some of the most gorgeous country on this planet exists right here. But internally, there's a hidden brokenness as a result of that sin. So we have some of the highest rates of depression, suicide, teen suicide, plastic surgery, prescription drug abuse, pornography usage, on and on and on, just the list goes. And because of that, there's a lot of a facade. So because people put such an emphasis on the outside and the inside struggling, there's a lot of just spiritual brokenness that's there. So a lot of times our planters are dealing with people who act as though they have nothing that they need. They're wealthy, they have good families, and everything just looks great. And so we're trying to plant churches for a lot of times for the rich man. And a lot of our areas that we have in Salt Lake City are very, very wealthy. I mean, the starting price for a home is $300,000, with the exception of a few other places. And we'll talk about a few of those, like where I live in Ogden, Brian, where he lives in Rose Park. But for the most part, a lot of those are very strong LDS strongholds and very hard to reach. So with all this coronavirus stuff, the LDS Church is not meeting at all. In fact, they probably will not be meeting, I think, worldwide until the fall, as far as I know. And some of these guys like Mike or Steve may be able to comment more on that. In the middle of the coronavirus, we had 2 different earthquakes. One of the earthquakes shook Moroni's golden trumpet from his hand, and it fell to the ground, which was really interesting. So they're repairing that, putting that back in place. But I think we are right now in a really unprecedented time. And I don't want to take Steve's story away from what God's doing there, but I believe a lot of Mormons and LDS people are logging on to online services like never before. So our planters are streaming, our planters are doing what everybody else in the country is doing. And again, if you're Mormon, you can watch from the comfort of your own home, and you can watch a service, you can watch a sermon, and no one knows what you're doing. And so I think we have a great opportunity right now to connect with people who may never hear the gospel on a typical, Sunday. So with that being said, we're still moving forward with the mission. We're still looking forward to planting more churches. We have a temporary kind of setback, and maybe it'll delay some plans for some future churches. But we don't want to slow down, and we want to take advantage of the opportunity we believe God's put before us. So that's kind of more of a big picture scale. And we can jump into, a bunch of the questions maybe after kind of introducing the other guys. But I may start with Steve first. So since Steve, I don't know reception wise, if he's going to be able to have you the good spot or not. So Steve, let's try with you. Steve's in Saratoga Springs, which is in Utah County, the most unreached county, in the United States. And so Steve, why don't you talk a little bit about just where you're at, what you're doing, and how all this coronavirus stuff and what you guys are doing in the middle of all of that.
Yeah, hey, I apologize, guys. If this becomes a distraction, let me know. I'm in a really bad area in California with reception right now. So can you guys hear me okay now?
Got you, man.
Okay. So yeah, we've been there for 3 years. We're one of, there's one other NAM supported church there, or that's a fresh plant, and there's one other church, but it's about 75,000 people in Saratoga Springs and Eagle Mountain, 93% LDS. Of that, about 81% are active, which is huge. That's just it's a hub there. It's the youngest area in Utah. The average age is 21 years old. The reason is it's considered frontier, western frontier in Utah County. Facebook is building there a big facility. Tyson Foods is building a big facility, and young people get USDA home loans for like 1.75%. So it's drawn a bunch of young people, young families out there. And so, we've been out there. We've been in Utah for 16 years, since 2005. And the church has been going for 3 years. And, really, to be honest with you, our heart is to plant churches in Utah County. I kind of tell our leaders, look, if we focus on the bigger prize, which is 700,000 people in the valley, God will take care of the four walls of Redemption Hill. And so it's just God's blessed us tremendously, both with people that are coming, with a free radio program. We've upped our online experience, and we haven't had under 5,000 views. We had 8,000 views two weeks ago, 8,200 views. They're watching. And so, we're pretty tied in with the city. The mayor's a friend of mine. We've got some interactions with them in the LDS church. Nothing interfaith, so to speak. They trust us with the city Christmas program. They want us to do the music, and so there's just a lot of cool things happening. The cool thing for us, as far as our church specifically, is we're finally taking on the demographic of the area we lived in. So the whole face of our church changed in 9 months, and so now the younger people are coming, and so. To that end, we're trying to really, we're trying to mission that genre, because that's just where we're at. And so we've had, like I said, we've just had some great success. We planted our first church. We're 3 years old. We planted our first church 1.5 years ago. We're planning on planting or helping plant we helped plant the second church in Colorado about 1 year ago. A friend of mine went out there. We're planning on helping Mike Cunningham. Is he on this call? Yeah, we're planning on having Cunningham. We're going to help him plant in Vineyard across the lake. He's attending our church right now. That'll be next year. And then we already have our 3 to 4 year away pipeline church planter who's in our church, and we're kind of raising him up and grooming him. So anyway, that's our heart. Keep it simple, and we believe God's honoring it, and he'll continue to honor it. So
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I want to introduce to you Phil Benikoff. Phil is in Farmington, Utah, and again, it's a different county, Davis County, but it's kind of the Utah County up north. So again, another LDS stronghold, tough place. Farmington's been around for a really, really long time, and Life Point Church is the first evangelical church, at least that we can count, that's been in this town. So, huge town, lots and lots of people. Phil, so talk a little bit about where you're at, what you're doing, and kind of how the coronavirus has affected you guys.
All right. Well, great questions. Our plan all along has been very relational. Minister to people, have people into our houses, do some of those things. And so coronavirus has really kind of made us rethink our ministry model. I still think that's the best way long-term to go about it, but when you can't do those things, what do you do? And so we've really kind of been trying to do some of those different things in our community and whatever else. One thing that coronavirus has allowed us to do, really allowed me to do, is I've been able to spend some time doing basically fishing discipleship and things like that. So take one or two of our guys, go out fishing for a couple hours. Now you have a captive audience and some of those things and stuff that we weren't able to do time-wise that now we're able to do. And so some of those things have been a huge benefit, I think, and huge blessing with that. And hopefully we can continue to do some of that as time goes on to really interact with our people in maybe different ways than we would be able to do before that. So going back just a little bit, my family and I have lived here almost 8 years. Our church is roughly, I'd have to look, but roughly 4 years old. And so we meet at a dance studio. That's one thing that has always been a little bit of a challenge community-wise because our community views church as the building. Church isn't the people. And so this coronavirus actually, I think, may have really good results in that stuff because people have started to realize a little bit of, hey, church may not actually be the building when you can't go to the building. And hopefully there's some things that we can have come out of that. I was just talking to the lady that owns the dance studio where we meet yesterday about trying to get back in and some of that stuff. She's LDS, yet she really likes us being there because she likes her couple $100 a month that she gets in rent. And just kind of, hey, when can we get back? Some of these things. And she was talking about how, I just really want to get back. These other guys might actually have some, they may have a little different stories, but of the LDS people I've talked to, she is actually the first person that mentioned she can't wait to get back to services. All the other people I know that I've talked with, neighbors, whatever, they're like, oh, this is great. We love doing home worship. Mostly because I think that's an extra day out on the lake or an extra day four-wheeling or an extra day whatever else. So I think there's actually, as we go through this, going to be opportunities where God is going to be working because people, especially if they don't go back to the fall, I mean, now they've had a whole summer where they're doing some of this, and I think their numbers aren't going to be quite what they were. And that gives us opportunity to where even with Jean yesterday, I was like, well, yeah, your church isn't open, but why don't you come out and visit ours? She's never visited. She's not sure she wants to, but who knows? And so I think there's some of those opportunities that God's working with. It kind of like Steve mentioned with people viewing stuff, as we have thrown on, Good Friday services and Easter services and regular services. I know that even looking at who's been viewing it, both my wife and I have had coworkers or other people that never would step foot in a church that you can see, hey, they're watching the live stream. And that's always encouraging and cool. And some of them, hey, reach out and whatever else. But some of those things are pretty cool to see that God's doing stuff, that may not be super visible right now, but he's working in people's hearts, people's lives. And so for us, it's really just trying to capitalize on some of those things, interact with people that we do see out and about, and try to find ways to minister relationally in ways that We maybe not have done things before that we have to do now, that we can do now, and some of that stuff. So did I actually answer your question, Bobby?
It's great, man. Thanks, Phil.
Perfect.
Let's see. We'll do Mike and Brian. So Mike is not far away from Steve, but the community he's in Vineyard is, I think, one of the fastest growing communities in Utah. I think 10 years ago, I mean, there was nobody there, and now it's on its way. I mean, 10,000, 11,000 people now, on its way even further than that. No evangelical churches of any kind. And so Mike's trying to start a work there, and again in Utah County. So a lot of these planners are in places where there's no other works or very little works. And Mike is trying to start a church in one of those places. So Mike, why don't you tell them about yourself? And your story is a little different because you're kind of on the front end. Mike's been trying to move towards building a core and getting to launch. And so coronavirus hits, and then all of a sudden you go, what do we do? So Mike's been taking that well. So Mike, why don't you talk a little about yourself?
Well, again, I'm happy. I'm unlike others. I've been here like 6 months, not 6 years, but it's been great. Just getting to know my neighbors. There's been good chemistry. My son has embraced an environment where there's cajillions of children to play with. And so he has been my social coordinator. We got here gratefully like Halloween week. And basically we met our entire neighborhood trick-or-treating. So that was, God has been good and faithful that way. And, I've done some stuff through Scouts and some other networking at the school. I've got a very good relationship with his school that I think that they're going to help champion me when the time is right. Just fun fact, if you've ever seen Footloose, the original one, I sit on top of the steel mill where Kevin Bacon does his big dance number. And, basically 10 years ago, this was a steel mill. And now there's just houses upon houses upon houses upon houses with no steeples, and not even a ward. And so you just pray for us as we continue to wrap our brain around this. Steve Pearson on this call, I'm an apprentice with him. He's taken good care of me, opened some doors with me in building a platform at the radio station and also online. And that's allowed me to have a little bit of a presence digitally here as people try to figure out who I am and what I'm about. And so it's been good. And so we're just looking forward to this COVID stuff lifting, and we're just going to get after it once this thing goes. So thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And then Brian's kind of one of our only indigenous guys. I mean, when I say indigenous, from the Utah, Idaho area, been kind of over those parts. And so I've learned a lot from Brian and just how to relate in Utah, how to minister in Utah well. He's one of the most innovative ministry guys that I know, in a difficult place too, difficult for different reasons, and going through some interesting changes right now. So Brian, why don't you talk a little bit about yourself, your ministry context, and then, some unique challenges you guys are facing right now.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad to be able to do, it's amazing to me what technology can do. And we all whine about it. I mean, I whine about it. I don't know if you guys are whining about, another Zoom meeting. Could you imagine if Paul had Zoom? Like, that just blows my mind what would have been accomplished while he was in house arrest in Rome. But anyway, I have been in Utah now for 22 years. I was born and raised in Boise. I was a non-believer in Utah. My wife was a Mormon, and I was a pagan. And we got saved here. So my entire Christian life, minus some military deployments and some time living at Fort Carson, has been from the context of Christianity in Utah, which is a challenging Christianity. So when I travel to other places, my wife's also a believer. We became believers about the same time, about 20 years ago, just shortly after we got married. When we travel to other places, we're still shocked. My kids don't understand at all how there could be churches, other places that aren't Mormon wards, And so that's the context of my Christianity for the most part, which maybe is why there's some different kinds of innovation, because I'm just desperate and hopeless and just hold on to God and hope for the best. But we're in Rose Park, which is an area of Salt Lake City. It's on the west side of Salt Lake City, and it's an area that has been sort of, I hate to use a term because it's not a fair term, but a lot of the community calls this the ghetto. It's the hood or the ghetto. And there's some good reasons for that. I've been taking stock of this. I don't like to talk about it too much because I think it's not very fair of the community to only point out these things, but this is a dynamic of the community where I'm serving. Less than half the population goes to the LDS Church, and of those, less than half are active. So they call themselves Mormons, but it's about a quarter of our population are active. Most of the refugees that are in Salt Lake or in Utah in general are in our area. So we have a real wide diversity in culture. We have no one majority culture here, which I find really interesting. Just in the pocket where I'm at, it's just a wide range of different cultures and different ethnicities and skin colors and languages and politics. So we have this very LGBTQ community thing sort of going on in Salt Lake. We have a Hispanic community that hardly speaks English, who was here before the Mormons got here. So you have the West Valley Hispanic community that they've immigrated here. Then you have the people who are often called the mestizo. They were here before. And so they're very politically motivated that they were here first. And so it's a different kind of Hispanic culture. The immigration issue, they didn't want people immigrating. I mean, that gives you an idea. Spanish speaking people who are opposed to immigration and want a wall to be built. So that's the kind of weird dynamic that we're in. And then you add this issue of violence and drugs and prostitution. So my kids, taking stock of this, what I was saying, we're getting ready to move. And we have not had a year since we've lived here. We've lived in the house. I'm moving out this week. I literally get keys to a new apartment or a new house in a new location on Friday, tomorrow. But we have not had a single year go by where there hasn't been 2 or 3 shootings that we are aware of where and how and when, whether they're drive-by shootings, actual homicides, and most of them have been somewhat graphic and troubling. There was one in the national news not that long ago where a man had kidnapped a college student who was on this Sugar Mama website thing, and then he killed her, and then he burned her body, and now he's in jail, and they didn't know where she was, and it was just really, and he literally burned her body in the backyard. That's an eighth of a mile on my street this way. Where he did that. And they just sold the house, and everybody's kind of watching. My neighbor had a gunshot shot through her window because she was a 65-year-old drug dealer. And I feel partly responsible for this because I stopped a lot of her drug trafficking. She was selling prescription painkillers to soccer moms who would drive over to our community, and she used to be a nurse and she was retired. And so we started watering the lawn and talking to all the soccer moms, making them feel uncomfortable. And then her only clients that were left, I would share the gospel with lots of people. And it was just kind of trying to put a stop to some drug trafficking. And the only people that were left were really hostile, difficult people. So our clients were no longer soccer moms. And then somebody shot a 9mm through a window the day before Christmas Eve, basically. And so I've had to sit down with my kids and regularly have this conversation, which prepared them that across the street, my neighbor, who we've shared the gospel with, we've known for 5 years, their kids are the same age as our kids. Last year, none of them professing believers, but still very interested in Christianity and talking with us quite a bit. Last year, the wife left the family for a man she met at our church, also not a believer, a guy who never opened the Bible in his life, and we started a discipleship relationship, and just in that overlap, they met, and so our church had to deal with this sort of affair, and it broke up the marriage, and it was really, really challenging, and we watched across the street as custody things, all the typical mess from divorce. But then on February 7th, our neighbor across the street, Jeremy, friend of mine, decided that it would be a good idea to go to their house where this couple is staying and kill Nathan. So he shot and killed him in the morning, and he shot her a bunch of times. And then he broke into a random stranger's house, and when the SWAT team showed up, he killed himself. And he had a plan for all this. His teenager was across the street, so she ran to our house, but we were still sleeping around to the next door neighbor's house. So we actually walked with her for about 2 months because she lived with the neighbor because she was scared and traumatized and kind of into the coronavirus stuff. That finally has gotten to where she's now with her mom, who did recover or is recovering. This is sort of the nature and dynamic of the community where I live. And that has not been easy because everybody that does come into our community is wanting, if you're in this community, you generally want to escape. People don't want to, they don't go, I really want to live in Rose Park. That's where I want to live. So we live in a community where people are leaving the community. And so we have launched a number of people. Most everybody we had have been indigenous. That's been one of the things about being an indigenous planter is we've been reaching indigenous people, which has been very helpful. we've seen a lot of those people go on and really live some pretty remarkable Christian experiences, leading a lot of other people to Christ. A couple of them are pastors. Just tried to help raise up and develop a lot of people, but it's really hard to have the stability in the community when everybody wants to leave the community the first chance they get. So if their business can transfer them, if they get a better job, they're like, I got to get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And so even now with the coronavirus and everybody's really contained, our house is 1,300 square feet. It's half finished. So we live in 900 finished square feet. The bottom half is a big open concrete basement. A kid's about to come in right now, or my wife. You want to say hi to all these? You get to say hi now.
No, I
She's
just
like-
want your driver's license.
Oh. She just needs she just needs my wallet. There you go. Anyway, that's a normal occurrence. She needs my wallet. Anyway, so the bottom line is my kids, my two boys have lived in an unfinished square concrete box. Like the basement is unfinished. And then we've lived in this 2-bedroom upstairs thing, which has been a missionary challenge. But I've realized during coronavirus, that's all my neighbors. And what I've watched as everybody's been sort of sheltered at home and all this stuff is multiple families have moved into these little houses. And so I'm watching as people are just crammed in the situation. A lot of them they cannot work from home. So I'm in the community where people don't have access to the internet. They can't work from home because a guy changes oil on the weekdays. They had 3 jobs trying to make ends meet and they got laid off from 2 of them. That's my community. And so what we're watching right now is a ton of domestic violence. We're actually seeing it happen. We're seeing the cops show up a lot. We're seeing people race off angry. We're seeing it play out all over the place. And so we're seeing a lot of that. We think there's probably some child abuse issues going on. There's been a couple of suicides in our neighborhood. There's been that's the dynamic of where my whole neighborhood smells like a pot farm right now. You take the dog for a walk any hour of the day, everybody's smelling pot, which my super innocent and lovely wife who grew up Mormon has been like, it just smells like it smells like skunks everywhere we go. And I'm trying to it's not that. So that's the dynamic of what we've been ministering in. We've been praying through that quite a bit on how to deal with this and really working through that. On top of that, my wife has kind of a respiratory issue there's a lot of pollution that sits right in there. There's some refineries and some things going on. And God has answered those prayers. We've said we need a place where we can form a base where we can minister into the community from a mature enough Christian base that we can actually make this more of a mission. Because being right in the thick of it is great, except it's not sustainable because you're always sending everybody out. So I think we've had 57 professions of faith and 36 baptisms in the last 5 years. But almost none of those people are still here, but they're all still walking with Christ well in other communities. So we want to try to continue doing that. So God has opened some doors, we think. We're working through this right now to merge with another church that is struggling. It's an older church. The pastor has been the pastor of this church since 1995. He has been a part of the church since 1972. He's an indigenous guy. It's a little, Whitechapel building in Bountiful, which is kind of still right in the same. It's between Farmington, where Phil is, and where I'm at in Rose Park. And so we feel like if we could expand our footprint, we could have more of a mature area where people aren't getting shot and reach into the area where we're at and reach into that area too. So we're in the process right now, in the midst of coronavirus. I think the coronavirus stuff actually brought this to the surface. We're in the process of looking at merging those 2 churches, doing our gatherings in their building, which would be one church's building, and then expanding that mission basically from where Phil's at, from Farmington all the way to North Temple, and just really pressing into the whole side of that, the whole Wasatch Front side right there, which is Davis County and Salt Lake County. And so that's our hope, but we're also trying to figure out how to reopen 2 churches and how to merge a church and how to become a healthy church, sort of in a not typical replant, but merge environment with coronavirus, with everything else going on. So we celebrated our 5-year birthday together as a church, and we did a thing on their property a couple weeks ago, a week and a half ago. So that's the dynamic of where I'm at and who I am. And I really don't want it to be, hey, look at how sexy all this violence and all this drug trafficking is. It's actually not sexy at all. I used to really think that was a great way to get partners. And so if you're only partnering because you want to have your mission team come to a ghetto, that's a bad way to choose who you partner with. And so I don't say that lightly. I say, this is really an area that needs Jesus, but Bountiful also needs Jesus, which is heavily Mormon, and Farmington needs Jesus, and Utah County needs Jesus. And so we're just really trying to press into that rather than press into the social ills. And so that's been our biggest push, which I think has produced the best results. Instead of getting someone off drugs, we get them to know Christ, and then we let Christ work through the results. So I don't know if that helps you get a feel for what I'm dealing with. And my wife took my wallet, so I'm poor as can be. Actually, she needed my driver's license because we're trying to get into this other house that we've rented, and she needs some information.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for giving us a quick overview of what you're doing, the area you're in, as well as the needs and opportunities that you're encountering.